Hi, welcome to the Bitcoin Bay Female Founders in Crypto series. Today I'm speaking to Iris Nevins, who is the CEO of Umba Daima. Umba Daima is a production studio that produces Web3 activations to onboard, educate, and connect people to Web3 products and opportunities. She has a fascinating background and runs a fascinating business, so I'm really excited to talk to her. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Iris, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Iris. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Umba Daima. We are a studio. We produce events and experiences in Web3. And we're also a network. And so as we produce all of these events and experiences, we're also building a network of people and brands and communities that are all collaborating to thrive in Web3.
Amazing. So I had come across you at the Collision conference in Toronto. I think you were speaking on the crypto stage, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
Yeah, so that was the genesis of me reaching out, and we're doing this series of interviews with female founders in Web3 for Bitcoin Bay in Toronto. And so I thought it'd be great to talk to you and kind of get a bit of an inside scoop on what you guys are doing. I wanted to kind of kick off, if it's okay, just talking about a little bit about your background, because you've put some stuff obviously on LinkedIn as well, just talking about how you got into social impact. And I think that's quite interesting just to understand the genesis of Umba Daima. So I guess first question is, what does Umba Daima mean and where does the name come from?
Yeah, so it means create forever in Swahili. And my business partner and co-founder came up with the name years ago when we originally launched as an e-commerce store. We were aiming to help artists in Africa and the Caribbean sell their work online. So Create Forever felt very fitting, and it's continued to be fitting even though the business has evolved.
So that's interesting. So that was physical goods at the time.
Yeah, at the time we were working with physical paintings and also turning paintings into prints.
Huh, that's incredible. And then it's evolved into a Web3 business. That's so cool. So
Mhm.
talk to me then a little bit about your early kind of forays into social impacts. Like, how did this whole journey start? And I guess there's an overarching mission that Umba Daima has. So how did that kind of grow before you had the idea for the business?
Yeah, it's funny. I would say I probably started doing social impact work when I was 15. I'm 30 now, so it's been a while. My first project, I ran a local chapter for Best Buddies, which is a national organization that helps kids that are mentally challenged. It helps them build relationships and friendships in a social kind of uh, network within schools. And so, I led a chapter at my high school in my junior year. I had a team, I had a secretary and a treasurer and all this cool stuff. And I would say ever since then, I've definitely been on the trajectory of social impact. I eventually became a Black Studies major in college. I, after college, was a part of the movement for Black Lives, doing community organizing work. So lots of canvassing, lots of, organizing protests and direct actions, speaking to politicians and sheriffs and, all of that. And so that's kind of the backstory. I would say I've always been passionate about social justice, but particularly closing the wealth gap. I've come to realize that I think a lot of these issues that we have in society can be addressed by closing the wealth gap. And so that's really my highest priority now. And so Umba Daima in its first iteration was in a small way kind of aiming towards that vision, right? Helping artists in Africa and the Caribbean who are, not earning much for their art, tap into Western markets, so they can sell their art for more, right? It's really evolved over time to really helping diverse communities access Web3 and all of its opportunities. And I think there's a huge opportunity to close the wealth gap through this work.
So gosh, that's a lot in 15 short years. So you've essentially like kind of run a business really when you were young, de facto, done some political work, some activism, and social work, I guess, you know, in terms of like helping the kids with the buddy system. That's amazing. What was it? Was the art link up? So you were selling kind of artwork for African and Caribbean artists, but do you have a creative streak? Is that some background that you have there as well?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So I would by most people's terms, I was an artist as a kid. So I did a lot of drawing and painting from a young age, and I just dabbled in a lot of stuff. I love to dance. I love to sing. I've done theater. I've done performance. I've written poems,
Wow.
songs, and I've just kind of dabbled in a lot of different artistic things. But I would say the larger impact is that my mother is an art collector, and she works in academia. She works in the humanities field, and so she travels a lot for work, and she always collects artwork when she travels. And she typically travels to the Caribbean, Latin America, and I think occasionally she's been to Africa, but it's usually Caribbean, Latin America. That's her region that she focuses on. So my childhood home has always had beautiful artwork everywhere, and she's constantly accumulating artwork. She knows a lot of artists in the local area in Miami where I grew up. So, she would go and negotiate, deals to buy art. And so I just kind of picked up art collecting from her. And that's
Interesting.
how I actually began to realize that these artists overseas were selling their work for so little.
That's fascinating. So you basically grew up in an art gallery.
Actually, yeah, I would say you could say that.
That's awesome. So talk to me about how you got into Web3 then. Like when did you first find out about this thing called crypto, and like what were your first kind of forays into this space?
Yeah, well, I had heard about crypto years ago, probably back in 2016 or 2017. I had bought ETH, a while back, and some Bitcoin. But it wasn't until 2020, the end of 2020, when we were getting ready to do a bigger launch for Umba Daima for the e-commerce store, that I ended up reconnecting with some college classmates. One is named Eric Han, and the other is named Kai. Kai is the head of crypto at Visa, and Eric Han is a marketing whiz. She also recently launched a venture fund called Audacity. And so Kai had recruited Eric Han to build a group of Black professionals that are in the crypto space, and with the goal of helping them collaborate and really kind of, come together and make sure that Black people don't get left behind in crypto. And so her and I just happened to reconnect at the exact same time that she was getting ready to start building this group. And even though I wasn't in crypto at the time, she was like, Kai's been telling me about this thing called crypto art. You should probably look into it. I don't really get it, but it seems like, something you might be interested in. So I started looking into it. They added me to the group. Kai was posting a lot of resources and articles. At that time, Beeple had just done his first drop, the one where he made, I think, like 2 million in like 24, 48 hours or something like that. It had just happened. And so all the articles were coming out from that as well. And so I'm reading the articles and I'm like, okay, there's something here. So that was the first moment. And then it took about another 3 months of really just observing, sitting on a lot of Clubhouse calls. At the time, there was no Twitter Spaces. So just, listening to people talk about the space and observing, artists and collectors, and trying to figure out like what is it that we can do in this space. And we realized that community was really powerful, that if you could build community as an artist or as a founder, that was really kind of the key to success. So we decided to start building community around Black artists.
That's fascinating because I guess for you, the distribution model as well with something being digital is like another step forward. You go from e-commerce, physical, and now anybody in the world that has access to a computer could basically, connect with you and build art without needing to actually have a means to send it to you, shall we say, physically or in any way kind of set up a store. So it's kind of fascinating. Can you just, for people that might not know that much about the space, can you just give a little bit of a brief summary from what your kind of take is of what an NFT is and what digital art is and how that fits into Web3? Like if somebody's not familiar with it, just a kind of brief explainer.
Sure, sure. So digital art is digital art. It's art that's made through usually computer software. There's a lot of software you can use to do digital painting, for example, on like a digital canvas. It's become a really popular tool nowadays. So you have digital artists who can paint beautiful paintings, but they're using an iPad versus a paintbrush, right? And then you also have animations, people who do motion graphics, photography, all of that kind of falls into the digital art realm. And for a long time, as a digital artist, it was really hard um, to earn an income off of selling your art as an authentic piece of work because of the fact that it's digital and it's really easy for anyone to make a copy. And so, whereas a physical painter or sculptor, for example, can say this is the original painting and here's a price that's attached to it, and I'm gonna sell this one piece, and that one piece will have a value that can grow over time. Digital artists weren't really able to do that. And what NFTs do is they basically allow you to assign ownership to digitally assign ownership to an asset. And the asset can be digital, it can be physical, it can be intellectual property, it can be a wide range of things. It doesn't have to just be art. But the art use case is what has really kind of blown the lid off of NFTs, because artists, I think digital artists started to realize the power of the stool, started flocking to the industry and using NFTs to sell their work. And artists like Beeple were able to show how much you could earn as a digital artist if you could actually sell your art as original artwork. So yeah, I hope that I don't know if that explanation.
That's actually probably the most elegant explanation I've ever heard of it. Because it really ties it back to the real world and what the challenges were previously in the digital space and how kind of NFTs have solved for that. Can you talk to me a bit about then, so Umba Daima, you kind of had it set up as an e-commerce store. How did you kind of manage that transition into the digital space, and how did you expand the business then to become more of a community beyond just the e-commerce sales?
Yeah, honestly, it was a bit of a process. Luckily, when we originally launched, we hadn't actually gotten that far. Like we weren't profitable, we weren't generating a lot of revenue or anything of that sort. The margins on prints are really small. So let's say you sell a print for, anywhere from 15 to 30, 40, $50 if it's a really big print. Once you take out the cost of, the printing, the shipping, splitting with the artist, you're making maybe a few dollars. So you have to have high volume. And we were really just starting to figure out, like, implement our SEO and social media marketing strategy and so forth, with the goal of eventually getting to high volume, but we weren't there yet. And so we saw NFTs, because of how innovative it was, because of how new it was, because there wasn't really anybody in the space, not anybody, but there weren't many people at that time in the space. We just thought that the ability to grow would be much bigger in this space versus a traditional e-commerce space. So that's one factor. And then what we did was we recruited a handful of artists, one in particular named Andre O'Shea, and we had recruited them to kind of be a part of this community we were building. And we said, hey, we're going to be doing online events, we're going to be doing social media promotion, we think that if you are a part of this, it'll help to benefit your brand and your ability to sell. And Andre, in that conversation, asked us to also manage him as well, because he needed a manager and thought that we could do a good job. And so we decided to try it out. And I think that combination of managing an artist that is really that was really talented, on top of also building that community at the same time, the combination together just allowed us to actually take off really fast. And so the brand started growing really fast. Andre, who wasn't selling hadn't made any sales at the time, started making sales very quickly. And the two just really kind of grew together. We started getting press, we started getting, contacted by all sorts of people trying to cover our story and like what we were doing. And then it just has really evolved from there.
Gosh, that's amazing. So I was having before we jumped on the call, I was having a little tour around the virtual art gallery, which was very cool. And it reminded me a little bit of at the start of the pandemic. I don't know if you remember, but a lot of global art galleries started putting their collections online. So you could kind of go and see the artwork digitally, which I thought was interesting. But I love the fact that when you go into your NFT gallery, it's like a proper gallery. You're kind of walking around, you stop at the painting, you click on it, you get the image come up. How much do you see that actually going into the physical world? Because I know that you do some physical events, right? And you're kind of showcasing artists. Like, where do you see the crossover in that, and where do you see the trajectory?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that we've done a few physical exhibits. We've also been able to curate for other folks that are hosting exhibits. So maybe we weren't able to be there physically, but we were able to curate the artwork. You know, the challenge with digital art is really just a matter of like technology, right? Do you have the proper screens to be able to display the art, and display it in a way that has large impact, right? And unless you have a television, like a large television, what you really need are these specialized screens for displaying digital art, and they're actually in high demand and they're really hard to get. So
Oh, really? So there's like a big hot market for that now.
yes, absolutely. A lot of the companies that sell these screens, they have wait lists. You have to wait months to get the screens. So we are seeing a surge in the number of businesses, hotels, galleries, offices, you name it, that are starting to put up these digital screens to display artwork. And I think NFTs have definitely been a major factor in that.
Gosh, that's so fascinating. So you seeing that in private collectors as well? Are they purchasing these screens for their homes?
Absolutely, yes. And there are screens that you can get kind of out of the box, like a specific size that you can put on your wall. But there are also companies like Black Dove, for example, that does custom installation. So they can come and they can, maybe you have a high end, real estate property or something like that. You can get a custom screen designed for a specific wall or location, and even maybe get a specific artwork designed for that screen, or vice versa. Maybe you find the artwork first, and then based on the dimensions, you design a screen for it. And they can do the types of screens that are almost kind of embedded in the wall, so you can't even really tell that it's a screen.
That's incredible. It's like a whole other, that's actually quite a fascinating concept, because you could turn over your art very seamlessly on your walls in your house, like I want this picture up this week, or some kind of revolving. Wow.
Exactly. It's like digital art playlists.
And how big, because you're based in Atlanta, so how big is this scene? Is the art scene in Atlanta quite big? Is it sort of similar to Miami these days, or what's the kind of scene like there?
No, I wouldn't say so. The fine art scene is not large here. I would say the music scene is probably the biggest in Atlanta, particularly hip hop.
Mm.
There's a lot of artists that come out of Atlanta. Um, but digital art hasn't, or sorry, just traditional art in general hasn't really taken off here yet. Um, but I think what we are seeing is that the technology industry is taking off here in Atlanta. It's one of the fastest growing tech hubs in the country. It is almost on par with San Francisco and some of these other places. So I think that by extension, we're going to see NFTs and art take off here as well.
That's interesting. So Umba Daima does more obviously than just the NFT piece. You've got the whole community building. Can you talk a little bit about how that's structured and how you sort of support people in that community?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because our work requires really two components. It requires being able to have a relationship with brands, right? And then being able to build community or tap into existing communities. And so what we basically do is we say, hey, like there are these people here that are interested, they want to learn, they're curious about NFTs. A lot of them have some sort of established skill set. They may be developers, they may be marketers, they may be um, creatives, right? Filmmakers, dancers, musicians, rappers, etc. They may be investors. There are a lot of Wall Street professionals that have moved to Atlanta from New York, right? Because it's cost of living. And so it's like, where our pitch is basically help us educate and develop these people, and in the process, we'll be able to grow your brand and grow your brand's community and channel these people to your products, to your services. One of the challenges I think a lot of people face is not knowing where to go or what to use. So, for example, if I am a musician and I want to launch my own NFT marketplace, like how do I do that?
Yeah.
It isn't really a straightforward answer. And sure, you could hire a developer, but it's probably going to cost a lot of money. If you're not technical, they might do a bad job, right? So what are the tools out there that you can use to actually launch your own NFT marketplace? Even for investors, for example, there's a lot of traditional investors that trade on the stock market. They use very complex trading tools, right? They may not have ventured into crypto yet because they don't realize that there are these tools. Coinbase has products, like,
Mm.
Binance has products outside of just like buying Bitcoin. You can actually trade, you can do all this different stuff. I'm not a trader, so I don't know all the details, but I know that there's like complicated systems that you can use. And so just helping them understand like what's available to them, how to use these products, and how they can actually like leverage this industry.
That's interesting. So how big is your team right now?
Yeah, our team is technically around 10 people. I mean, it really is bigger if you think about all the people that contribute, but we have a lot of part-time folks. We have a lot of folks that are in many ways kind of volunteering their time right now, until we become profitable, or we fundraise and can afford to pay more people. So it's a very kind of fluid team, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess typical of early stage companies, right? And
Yeah.
so where are you hoping to go? Because you guys are doing quite a lot now for the community and you're building out all of this infrastructure. What's your kind of ultimate aim? Like, where are you trying to arrive at with the business?
Yeah, we want to become we want to continue community building. We want to do community building as a service on a large scale. We want to be able to build communities that are regional, city specific, global, industry specific, profession specific. We're really kind of we really see community as an area of expertise that we're developing. And we think that there's a lot of opportunity to help people build wealth in the process, by developing these communities and helping brands figure out how to develop these communities. So, right now we're kind of like a middleman, but we also are in the process of building technology to kind of remove ourselves as a middleman and connect brands to these communities directly and community builders. We are also working on an initiative in Atlanta to do a 1 year festival, a 1 year Web3 festival. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
that's cool.
So we're in the process of fundraising for that as well, and we're talking to everything from like big companies to small companies to raise the funds to pull off this festival.
That sounds incredible. What would that look like then? Would that be very much like an artist focused festival?
Yeah, so we would be tapping into all of the demographics that I mentioned. So um, tech professionals, artists, investors, developers, founders. That's another big one as well. And so the idea is that throughout the year, there's going to be monthly events, 2 events per month, one educational event and one social event. And each event will have a target demographic that it's focused on. So for example, we want to have an event for kids and families. So we're organizing a fair, a Web3 like kids fair where the families can come and they can experience
Nice.
immersive technology, they can experience the digital art, they can, test out all of these different tools, they can ask questions, they can learn, and they can also be in a kid friendly, kid safe environment as well. A lot of the events that happen in Web3, just from my observation, they're very, very, very limited. There's a huge lack of creativity. They tend to cater to people that listen to a certain type of music and people that have the time and the money usually to travel to conferences,
Right.
and to single people or people that don't have kids, and oftentimes men. And it's like, where are the events that cater to women? Where are the events that cater to LGBTQ folks? Where are the events that cater to Black and Latino folks? Right? Like, there's so many types of experiences that we can create to tap into these communities and educate them in a way that fits like their interests. And
And
that's what we
I think to your early point as well, where are the family events actually? Because now that I think about it, there aren't any. So I mean, not really. Like, I mean, kids kind of get involved in stuff because they pick things up really quickly. But if you're a family and you want to do a family outing to something Web3 based, there actually isn't anything. That's a huge gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. Wow. I should connect you up with Angela actually, because one of the first interviews I did was Angela Chan from EVOS. So she's a teacher out in BC in British Columbia, and her co-founder Kyle, they're both teachers and friends, and they founded this company to essentially start producing material and educating teachers and kids on like the Web3 space. So she might actually enjoy connecting with you on that and maybe doing some kind of a collaboration, because they're obviously looking at how to kind of bring children into this space in a way that's enjoyable and engaging for them. So this could actually be something quite exciting that they might be interested in exploring.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that an intro for sure. I also
yeah.
have a project she might be interested in as well. So definitely link.
Okay. I will connect you for sure. So I wanted to ask you a little bit as well about mentors, because I feel like when people start their own businesses and they do stuff in life, often there are some key people that have really been an inspiration to them and have kind of supported them in that journey. You've obviously mentioned your mum, who's an art collector, so she's obviously been a huge influence for you in terms of kind of developing in this space. But are there any people, I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit about how she inspired you, but also if there are any other people that have really been kind of key in your journey, and how?
Yeah, shout out to my mom. um Yeah, it's really cool to see her influence on me. My dad's as well. My dad is an entrepreneur. He owned restaurants for 26 years, owned and ran. And so
Ah.
I grew up in the restaurant business. I was, on the cash register at like 6 years old, giving people their change. I was very good at math. By the time I was 16, I was doing payroll, and
Are there no child labor laws in Atlanta?
yeah, well, probably not. I mean, and I was also in Miami, but I think that there's no rules against like family business. But yeah, he definitely had me and my brother working. But I also enjoyed it because I mean, I didn't really have anything else to do, and I got to meet people. I got to talk. I got to do this cool thing on the cash register.
I can't even imagine how cool that must have been for customers. They turn up at the checkout. There you are.
And I literally had to sit on a stool because I couldn't see the counter.
Booster seat. Actually, do you know that's quite interesting though? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people who start businesses, they have an idea and it's all very like creative or exciting, but they're maybe not so good at the administration piece. So it's actually interesting that you've got some experience of that from a very, very young age, like the bookkeeping element. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. I definitely was able to see, everything that it takes to run a business. Even marketing, for example. Me and my brother, we used to do a lot of the flyers, and digital like materials, posters and whatnot for the restaurant. We used to have to go out and like give out flyers to people. So I think that definitely had an impact on me for sure. In terms of, I've had a number of mentors during my technical career because I was an engineer and an engineering manager before I launched Umba Daima. And so, I had a number of people that supported me there. But when I started Umba Daima, the first person that really jumped in to mentor me, her name is Tanya Evans, and she's a lawyer. She's actually an IP lawyer. I know she does a bunch of other stuff, so I'm simplifying it, but she's really well known, really well established in the space, and her expertise is also in crypto. So she does a lot of education and courses around crypto, investing, security, etc. And I early on needed lawyers because we were working with an artist and dealing with IP, but we couldn't.
Right.
We couldn't afford to pay lawyer fees because we had no money. So she, and she's also very expensive. Um, but once she had been watching me in the space for a little while, and she was like, you know what, I see your work, I see what you're doing, I believe in you, and I'm gonna give you X amount of months pro bono. And so she did that, and then she continued to help, and she, continued to provide support, resources, connections, and then she eventually invested as well in my company. So she was the first,
Wow.
and yeah, it's been really cool. And then there's a second person, his name is Kyle Hill. Um, I actually met him through the same group that I told you Kai and Eric Han started. He's a two-time founder, founded and sold a tech company twice. And at the time when we met, he had just gotten his second company acquired and had joined his new company that had acquired him. And he wanted to build out this like innovation arm, this crypto Web3 innovation arm, and connected with me because he saw the work that we were doing and thought that we could help with, providing like insight into what people need and what kind of problems need to be solved. And that just flourished into this whole bit mentorship. And he has recently actually joined officially as a technical advisor, but he's been unofficially advising for almost a year now, and now he's officially leading the building of our first tech product.
That's phenomenal. Wow. Um, So I guess if somebody wants to kind of access your community, then how do they do that as an artist, or if they want to get involved? I mean, obviously, like go to your website, which we should actually give the URL, but I'll put it in the show notes as well. But what's the kind of process of engagement for them, and what can they get out of it? Like, what can they expect?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing is to join our newsletter. If you go to umbadaima.com/network, there's a layout of all the different kind of access points. So we have our live events, we have online events, we have our online community, which is mainly on Discord. And then we also distribute a lot of information and opportunities through our newsletter as well. So I would say definitely kind of the newsletter at least as a starting point is a good place to start. And then from there, you can get information on all the other stuff that's going on. If there's an exhibit happening and applications are open, or if there's an event coming up, or a workshop, we do online workshops as well. All of that information is distributed through the newsletter.
That's phenomenal. I'm curious as well, because I mean, you obviously like have done a bunch of activism and so on, and looked at this space and kind of underrepresented groups. Do you have any thoughts as to why we don't see as many female founders in Web3? Or do you think maybe there are as many, they're just not as visible? Like, do you have any sense as to what the scene looks like, and what the reasons might be?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't as many female founders, I think, in the tech industry in general, even though that is changing. Um, I think there's just a lot of barriers to entry. Building a company is really hard. Having the network to be able to uh, pull it off, to raise funding, to hire the right people, to build the right strategy. Most people can't just figure it out on their own just by reading books. Like, you need people that can help you, and women tend to be more limited in terms of their access to those things. And then I think that just compounds with crypto and Web3 because it's such a new industry. And it seems that typically white men are the first to kind of explore innovative technology spaces, or oftentimes have the privilege to be able to explore these new innovative spaces.
The network.
Yeah, exactly. They hear about it first. They have people around them that are involved or that are doing it. They're able to take risks, even though there isn't much like assurance of success. They're able to take on that risk. Um, and
That's
so
actually a very good point that you raised, because it was interesting a few years back when I was looking at the stats, and I don't think they've shifted that much. I think female founders got something like 2 to 3% of all VC funding versus male founders. And I thought that was quite interesting, because when you talk about taking risks, obviously having financial backing is extremely helpful in that. And you see a lot of failed businesses in Web3, but they had a lot of initial backing that allowed somebody to experiment in that. And if you can't get that initial backing, you don't ever essentially learn to be a successful founder. Um,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
There's a lot of building a startup is trial and error. A lot of founders have failed, for the first one or two times, and then also there are there there are biases. I haven't looked at these studies in a while, but I know that there are studies showing that investors and VCs will weigh men and women's responses in interviews differently. It's just like the same bias that Black people face or people of color in the interview process. I think they did a study where they like gave the exact same deck and the exact same pitch to a set of investors, except the founder was woman in one case and the founder was male in another. And it was like the the outcomes for men were just wildly different than the female founder. So I think that's an issue as well that we can only change by just getting more women to become VCs and investors.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that probably is one of the key pieces to change things. It's interesting. I feel like Web3 is becoming more accessible for everybody to a certain extent, but I think what you guys are doing is great in terms of the education piece, but also the infrastructure that allows people to come in and access the space. Because I think you made this point earlier that if you're an artist and you want to build, you don't know what protocol to use, you don't know like how to get things started, you don't have the network to promote your work. And they're the kind of very foundational things that help you when you're trying to break into this space. So actually creating the community that does that as well as all the other things is actually quite powerful in terms of a network effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your network is your net worth. That's our new favorite
Oh,
quote.
I like that.
It's really true. It's also to some extent unfortunate, right? But it is true, and you can build a network around you if you know how, or if you have
Mm.
access to people that know how.
This is a lot of it as well, is actually just having the information. Like somebody might be the best artist in the world, the best developer, but if they don't actually know that that thing even exists, they can't
Exactly.
even build the network, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. So many people are limited by just not knowing.
Can I ask if you have you guys looked at, and if yes, like how are you doing it in terms of accessing those people that actually don't even know this thing exists? Because you're obviously going to have a lot of proactive outreach to your company to say, I'm interested, how can I work with you guys? But are you doing kind of active outreach to communities or people that really like may have absolutely no exposure to this at this stage?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We haven't, it's something that we want to be able to do. And we definitely want to be able to do that through the 1 year festival. Um, but it's challenging because it requires more time and ultimately more money to tap into people that aren't familiar at all, because you need multiple touch points in order for someone to actually make a decision to take action, right? Versus someone that is already ready, or someone that already knows enough to know there's something here that's valuable, even though they don't really understand why. And so they're already kind of waiting or seeking out an opportunity to learn more. It costs a lot less money to get that person to come and be a part of what we're doing. So part of it is just getting to a point where we have the flexibility, we have the capital and resources to really extend our reach further.
Mm. How do you go about fundraising then in your company? Are you sort of going to angel investors, corporations? Like what kind of model is there? And do you have any thoughts for other female founders as to what good funding sources they might want to contact or work with?
Yeah, right now we're primarily focused on business partnerships. So, closing deals with brands where, there's some sort of exchange. They provide us funding and we provide marketing through community building, right? That's the general offer. And so even for this Atlanta event series, we're not saying just like give us money as a charity case. We're saying, hey, we can help you meet your strategic KPIs. Are you trying to hire? Are you trying to reach
Mm.
certain numbers in terms of hiring? Are you trying to reach certain numbers in terms of diversity? Are there certain roles that are really hard to fill? Um, are you trying to increase your user base, right? Like there's all of these different strategic KPIs that we can help them meet. So that's our primary focus right now. We also have an NFT project that we're working on that will um, hopefully if we execute as planned will generate revenue as well. And then we have done one small funding round. We raised 175,000 earlier in the year. We are about to do another to raise 300,000, and then eventually a 2.5 million raise as well. In terms of fundraising, I think that one of the things that I wish that I had known sooner was how to do lead generation and outbound marketing. I think that anyone that is able to hack the sales process um, has a huge advantage, and there's a lot of opportunity to actually generate revenue without the need for investors or, venture capital. And so I would say, if you're a founder and, you're building your business, whether you just started or you haven't started yet, like definitely figure out not just marketing, like, social media ads or, SEO, but figure out like how are you going to actually turn people into paying customers, and figure out what the cost of that is going to be, and find people that know what they're doing and get that set up as soon as possible.
That's great advice. That's really great advice, actually. Is there anywhere that you would point people to learn that if they kind of want to go down that road? Would you have any suggestions as to resources for learning that, or is it just do and learn?
That's a really good question because I did not have any. I have had to figure it out through trial and error, and some expensive mistakes. But I would say, really just like do research on um, sales, on business development, and outbound lead generation. Inbound lead generation is really valuable as well. So I would say, look up those terms, outbound and inbound lead generation, before you even think about spending money on ads.
Right, that's fantastic advice. Do you have any other advice that you would give aspiring female founders who want to get into this space, like how they could get started?
Um, if they want to get into the Web3 space?
Yeah, let's say if they have an idea and they want to start building some business on Web3 and they don't know really where to start. Like, do you have any suggestions as to should they start with a technical piece? Should they start with,
Yeah.
contacting communities? Like, what would be the best approach if you were doing this from scratch?
Yeah. So I would say first, I would say consider if you really need to launch a business. Is it really necessary? And are you really prepared mentally, physically, financially, in terms of your family, your situation? Are you really prepared for what it takes? Because it takes a lot. Whether you're funded or not, it takes a lot. And it's a huge sacrifice. And it's a sacrifice that you're gonna have to make for possibly, most likely, many years. Um, and there's a lot of ways to contribute, or to get into the space without starting a business. There's a lot of startups that need help. There's a lot of startups that are hiring. There's a lot of startups that need consulting. So there's a lot of ways to add value without starting a business. It's the first thing I would say.
Brutal advice, but very needed.
I would say if you've done all of that and your answer is yes, you want to start a business, I would say really think through what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And make sure that you're not just trying to capitalize on a trend, right? Like you see people making money off of NFT projects, so you're going to launch an NFT project, right? Like a lot of people fail. Like you see in the news a lot of the successes, but a lot of people fail when they're just doing these kind of surface level projects. The people that are winning and that are going to win are the ones that are solving a valuable problem that other people are willing to pay for. They're willing to pay you for that solution. So figure out what that solution is that you're offering, and then figure out what the monetization strategy is going to be, and then figure out who your team is going to be, and do your best not to start alone. Even if it's, a bunch of friends or a bunch of advisors that you start out with, like really, really try not to do it alone. It's going to mean having to convince them to buy into your vision and to make a sacrifice as well. But you'll get a lot farther, a lot faster if you start off with a team.
That's fantastic advice. That's actually very, very great advice. So I guess just to wrap up then, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, you can find me Iris Nevins. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at Cosmos Iris. That's CosmosIris. And then, of course, umbadaima.com. There's a number of different ways that you can contact us through the business. It's all listed on the website. Most of it involves filling out a form, but we're very responsive when it comes to those forms. We had to stop giving people our email address because the amount of emails was just crazy. But the forms allow us to really kind of filter through and figure out who's who, and direct them to the right people.
Fantastic. Well, that's been great. Thank you so much, Iris, for your time. I know you're super busy building your business, obviously. And congratulations on everything you've done. I'm really excited to see the festival come to life. Actually, that's going to be really fun. And if I can come, I will do my utmost to be there. And yeah, I mean, thank you. Just the pointers and the advice, I think, are absolutely invaluable. It's great to see such a successful female founder in this space. So I wish you and Umba Daima all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. It's been a pleasure.